I would like to start our Rising Stars panel. These are exemplary women, as I mentioned, who need any amount of recognition for them is not going to be enough. But let's start with our very own host, our board member, Syra Madad. Dr. Syra Madad is an internationally recognized infectious disease epidemiologist and the chief bioprepar. Dr. Syra Madad is an internationally recognized infectious disease epidemiologist and the Chief Biopreparedness Officer at New York Health Plus Hospitals. She leads the system-wide Special Pathogens Program, overseeing preparedness and response efforts for infectious disease threats, and has responded to outbreaks including Ebola, Zika, and COVID-19. A fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School and advisor to national biosecurity boards, Dr. Madad is also a published author, educator, and was prominently featured in the Netflix docuseries Pandemic: How to Prevent an Outbreak. Let's have a round of applause for our host. The first rising star is Anoussa Salim. Anoussa Salim is the director and United Nations representative for SOLCI, a UN Global Compact member organization where she advances sustainable development and human rights initiatives. With prior experience as an advisor at the UN and in city government on public health research, she brings deep expertise in international diplomacy and policy. Anoussa holds degrees from Fordham and NYU and is an accomplished writer with work published in Foreign Affairs, Diplomatic Courier, and Asia Times, and academic journals. Next up, we have Ahsia Badi. Ahsia is the executive director of the New York City Children's Cabinet, bringing over 15 years of experience in public health, child development, and community advocacy. She has held leadership roles at Stanford, Columbia, and New York government, and has previously served as a senior advisor to the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services. With a background in occupational therapy and public health, Ahsia is a dedicated advocate for equity, youth empowerment, and inclusive policy, and has been twice named to the City and States Asian Power 100 list. Next up, we have Farah Chalisa. Farah is a human rights attorney and activist committed to advancing civil liberties and uplifting marginalized communities, particularly Muslim Americans. A graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School, she served in multiple leadership roles and was honored for her pro bono work in international human rights advocacy. Motivated by her post 9/11 experiences, Farah co-founded a human rights organization and continues to build bridges through dialogue, law, and public service. Welcome, Farah. Next up, we have Shafaq Jameel, who is not only a rising star, but also a leadership council member. Shafaq is the Senior Director and Head of Sustainability at Marsh McLennan, where they lead the development and implementation of global ESG and sustainability strategies. A lead accredited professional and NREL Energy Execs alum, they bring a data-driven, collaborative approach to advancing sustainable practices across multinational organizations. With a passion for creating positive environmental impact, they are committed to driving meaningful change through leadership and innovation. Welcome, Shafaq. And we also have another rising star who was supposed to join us today, but unfortunately couldn't make it, Noor Aftab. So let's start ahead with the panel. I am so sorry. Farah Habib is a creative writer and English professor at Bristol Community College in Massachusetts, where she teaches and mentors with a focus on cultural identity and belonging. She co-directs the America-Pakistan Education Exchange, a women's empowerment initiative connecting students across borders through dialogue and collaboration. A published author and a member of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, Farah uses storytelling to bridge divides and amplify the voices of Pakistani women in the diaspora. Welcome, Farah.
Thank you, Maha. All right, so let's get the show on the road. We have an amazing powerhouse of females, as you've just heard their bios. They are extraordinary females driving change across every sector of society, and you'll get to hear a little bit about what they do. Our theme this year is Women Empowering Women, so I'm excited to hear their journey and particularly how they've been, uplifting and empowering our community along with that. So with that, I'm going to share a question. I'll ask each of you to respond succinctly, and then we'll go from there. So my first question to our amazing panelists is, we often talk about women empowerment in abstract terms, and so I'd love for each of you to just share, what does women empowerment mean to you? And if you can share a pivotal moment that shaped your journey and commitment to women's empowerment. So we'll start with Ahsia.
Sure. Is this on? Oh, great. That's awesome. So assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks so much to APF for inviting me to speak, and say thank you so much to Syra for being the moderator here. It's really great to be around amazing Pakistanis and amazing Pakistani women, especially. So I would say to you that I think women's empowerment really is about making sure that women have the ability to do what they want to, and also have the ability to fulfill all of the pieces of their own self that they want to be able to do, and do it in a way that does not feel stressful. So, and the pivotal moment I would say to you is that, I come from a background, as you saw, with occupational therapy and public health. And the question people always ask me is like, when they hear about what I do now, like, how did you get here? And I think one of the most interesting things was, for those of you who are from New York, may be familiar with the World Trade Center mosque controversy, right? So that was at a community advisory board downtown. And the mosque itself had the legal right to be built. It was as of right. And people, it's suspected most people came from either other parts of the tri-state to protest there. But the elected officials at the time recognized that there weren't enough Muslims on community advisory boards. It was Bloomberg who was mayor, and there was Scott Stringer who was the borough president, and the council members. And so not only did they support the mosque's ability to be built, they also proactively reached out to Muslims to get them on community advisory boards, because they saw that as a pathway to really understanding and building community advocacy and ability. And I think I joined the community board when I was a stay-at-home mom. I had no idea what it was. And community boards are called zoning boards in other parts of the country, but they are the most local level of government. In New York, you're appointed, not elected. And that, to me, was really pivotal. It built like a real love and passion for local government and its ability to change lives, as well as the ability of public to change the way local government served them in a better and more thoughtful way. So, yeah.
I love that.
Thanks. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for having me here. And APF is just very impressive with the work that you're doing. So for me, a pivotal moment, you mentioned being a stay-at-home mom. So for me, I have a cousin who said, I became a feminist the day my daughter was born. And I would have to agree with him. This is a little bit of a personal story. So as I was in labor with my firstborn child, I didn't know what the gender was going to be. And so to distract me from the labor, the doctor was chatting with me, and I was talking, and I said, if I have a girl, I want to make sure that that the child is independent and can sustain herself. And so to answer your question, a pivotal moment for me was when I became a parent of a daughter. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I would say for me, women empowerment is having their voices be heard. In addition to my work at the UN, I'm also a freelance journalist. So I think that was a very pivotal moment for my career, because I learned so much about women's struggles. My most recent article was about temporary marriages in Iraq. And I got to interview so many victims that went through that. And I realized that these women should be heard and their voices should be heard. And I think my journalistic contribution was the biggest pivotal moment for me. It made me realize that I need to work more on this and get more women's voices out there.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
So I've been so inspired throughout my lifetime to see how women's empowerment and women's seat at the table has grown so much. I feel like even, I'm not that old, but even through my lifetime, I've really seen kind of a difference where now it's just expected that women will work, women can be leaders. I think there's still a lot of work to do, but to see that difference has been great. And really what was pivotal to me is I'm really passionate about climate change, and that's something that women are at the front lines. And then because women are nurturers in our community, we're stewards of the next generation, really getting their voices at the table, especially in those least developed countries that will be at the front lines of climate change, something that really drives me.
Well, let me start by saying this feels like women empowerment, to be on a panel with so many incredible women. I'm really having imposter syndrome here, but it feels amazing to be in a room, especially in a room of South Asians where, women empowerment really has come a long way, and to be able to speak on the topic and speak with other women about our experiences and about where we go from here as well. But in terms of pivotal moments, there's a couple I can think of. I think one particularly is more personal, and I it's so small, because sometimes it is the small moments that can really change everything. And it was literally a moment of me scrolling on Instagram a couple of years ago, and a time where I was really feeling sad about not meeting certain expectations society has of women, not being married, not having a child yet, still figuring out my career. And I came across a post somebody had posted that talked about like, well, what would 7-year-old you think of you right now? And I really thought about it, and that post really stayed with me the rest of the day. And as I was going to bed that night, I realized 7-year-old me would be so proud of who I was. 7-year-old me would be least concerned with the fact that I wasn't married, or I didn't have a kid, or I didn't have my life 100% figured out. All she would be thinking is, wow, like you're an attorney, you have a law degree, you went to law school you're proud of, you have friends who love you, you have family who you get to support, you have been able to help empower other women through your career so much. That is what she would be thinking about. And so I asked that question to myself a lot. I try to hold on to 7-year-old me. I picture her in my head. And when I'm feeling disempowered, I think back to her a lot. Sometimes I'll give her a hug. Sometimes she'll give me a hug. So that's one moment. And then I think I see a lot of empowerment in my clients. I volunteer pro bono as an attorney for survivors of domestic violence, which of course men can also be survivors of domestic violence, but largely survivors are women. And so actually the organization is called Empowering Women. And I really love the model of it, because while I provide legal assistance, the organization really looks at the woman as a whole. It's not just about like, how can we remove you from the situation where your power has been taken away from you, but how can we give you the tools to make sure that you genuinely feel empowered to be able to move forward with your life independently, whether that means therapy, whether that means a resume review, whether that means creating independent opportunities based off the skill sets that the women have, to help them be independent. And a lot of it is also camaraderie between survivors and those who are helping them. And we do a fashion show every year as our fundraiser. And we actually, those who are comfortable with it, we have the survivors walk in it, wearing clothes that they've sewn themselves in their sewing workshops. And it is one of my favorite days of the year, honestly, because just to see the way that these women light up, because they've been given that freedom to walk, they're not asked to be anything other than who they are, and they are loved and appreciated for who they are, good and bad experiences in hand, and I think that's how we can empower each other. Amazing. Thank you, Farah. And I'm going to pull one thing out from that just amazing statement that you just shared, which is imposter syndrome, because I think everyone at some point has perhaps felt that way. And I want to take a poll in the room, how many of you, by raise of hands, have ever felt imposter syndrome in your life?
I know one person who does it. Kashif, I don't know why.
Put your hand on.
It was a long time. Biggest imposter.
I love it. I love it. Well, if you read the stats, females experience imposter syndrome at least double the rate of men. And most females here have raised their hands as I took that poll. So I would love for each of our panelists to share how have you personally, if you've experienced imposter syndrome, how have you overcome it? And what advice would you give another woman who's perhaps likely feeling it today? And so we'll start with Ahsia.
Thanks, Sarah. So yes, imposter syndrome, and I would just say fake it till you make it, because no one knows. And I think you actually are able to do a much better job than you think you can, and have trust in yourself and your ability to deal with whatever sort of issue is at hand. And I think that's probably my best advice to anyone.
Yeah. So I teach for a living. I'm a professor of English, and I've been doing it for about 2 decades now. And every time I walk into the classroom, or at the beginning of a semester, or when I attend a conference, I don't feel like I belong. I'm like, is this really me? Or should I be here? And I'm also a creative writer, and I just completed another degree. And okay, there are all these writers around me. Am I supposed to be here? So my advice is to really remind yourself that other people have stories or challenges that they're overcoming. Everybody has obstacles to overcome, and to remind yourself that you don't know what they were just doing before they walked into this room, what they were just trying to overcome, what they had to do to get here, just like you know, so just remind yourself of that. And to me, you know, that helps, you know, like everybody else is in the same boat.
For me, it was at my first General Assembly. I was in front of like several delegates, member states, presidents, prime ministers, and I felt like, why am I here? This is the world stage. And the way I coped with it, I said that if I'm here for a reason. Even if I'm a minority, I'm gonna make sure that my voice is being heard. And always remember that you're in the room for a reason. Like, they're not just putting you in this room for any reason. So I think it's good to remind yourself of that.
Yeah, this is something I've definitely struggled with throughout my career. I was the first in my immediate family to go to college, and then I decided to go into the environmental space. There's not a lot of desis in there. I think a lot of the uncles and aunties thought I was crazy when I said I was studying environmental engineering. And then joining the corporate world, you know, I didn't, sustainability can be a space of privilege. A lot of people who entered the field came from a fairly privileged background. And it was hard to connect sometimes. It's like, yeah, I didn't grow up summering in Europe or doing whatever it is that you do. But really kind of what helped me is kind of what you said, Anoussa, which is, you know, I'm there for a reason. Like, I'm in the same company you are, in the same role you are, for a reason. And then to fake it till you make it. So people tend to think of you, what you give off. And it was hard to kind of take that to heart, because as Desi women, we're taught to be quiet, to be demure. That doesn't work in a corporate environment when you're trying to drive change. So I had to break that mindset. The other thing that really helped me was some of my supervisors who were so accomplished, and then they confided me that they have imposter syndrome. So hearing that, you know, everyone deals with it, kind of helped me like come to terms with my own and build ways to deal with it. And I would put a call to action out to everyone in this room, like provide that space to people on your team, young people, to kind of like be vulnerable, and then, you know, let them overcome their imposter syndrome, whatever it is. What helped me is like preparing really, really hard. That way, Like if I'm nervous, I know my stuff. And I got to come to terms with that. In my current role, I present to the board of our company every quarter, Fortune 200 company. And that was so scary the first time I did it. But now it's just a conversation. It might as well be a Monday morning check-in. And again, just like having a great supervisor who let me feel vulnerable, but then also reminded me, yeah, you are the expert, you are the leader, really kind of helped me overcome that imposter syndrome.
I'll start with the fake it till you make it advice too, because so psychology was one of my majors in undergrad, and there is a concept that we learned in one of my classes about how if you are sad, even if you force yourself to smile, although you are not actually feeling happy, it will trick your brain into thinking that you are feeling happy, and you will automatically start to feel a little better. That's always what I think of when I hear fake it till you make it, because that is psychologically a real concept, you know? So I definitely second, third that. And then there's a story I think of when I think of imposter syndrome. I've known I wanted to be an attorney since I was 12, maybe. And my whole life I was told, you know, like as a woman of color, if you want to be an attorney and you want to go to like a good law school, then you can never get in any trouble with the law. And that means like, don't ever get a parking ticket, don't ever get a speeding ticket. All of that, when you apply to law school, you have to report. So to this day, I made fun of for being a slow, overly careful driver, because I was like, I can never get a speeding ticket, I won't get into law school. And then after I got into law school and after I graduated law school, I started my work at a big law firm in Chicago on a team that was largely, there was one female partner, and every other partner on that team was male, Catholic, white. There was really no diversity on that team whatsoever, to the point where the recruiter asked me, are you sure you want to be in this team? It will be hard. And so about a year in, we were out to lunch to welcome another associate who had started, and I started in COVID. So I guess it was a lunch for both of us. And the topic at lunch became, let's all talk about the time we spent a night in jail. And every single white man on that table had spent a night in jail for some reason or another, for something like a disturbance because his band played too loudly, or he got in a fight at a bar or something. And I'm sitting there like, I was terrified of getting a speeding ticket, and every man around this table has literally been in jail for a night. And what it made me realize is like, the reality is still that as a woman of color, had I gotten in any trouble with the law, it would have still been harder for me to get into law school than any of those men. And I think what I took away from it is that if I've had to work twice as hard to get here to the same places where these people are, then why am I the one feeling like an imposter when I am the one who has worked twice as hard to learn, has twice the experiences, has made twice the effort? In fact, that should validate myself further, not make me feel like an imposter.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. And one thing that came to my mind as I was listening to your comments and reflecting is there's a lot of parents in the room. The importance of like instilling unabashed confidence in your children. Like that is one way to nip imposter syndrome, is like really build that confidence in your children that they can do whatever they want, that they're great, kind of from that young age. And I've seen throughout my career that children that kind of have that really safe environment where they can experiment, they're not afraid to fail, they've been told like they're great, they really can succeed in these environments where someone has to step up and be confident and be a leader because they've had this history of doing so.
And if I could just add on, like also as a parent, and I think also as a supervisor, to your point, like allowing your supervisee being vulnerable or your child to be vulnerable. But I also think like there's value in saying like, I'm really anxious about this and I'm really worried about that and I'm preparing for it. And this is these are the strategies I'm using so that I feel confident going in. And I think those both, I mean, I hate to, like I do that with my supervisee as well as with my own kids. And I think that's really valuable to be in a place that we all accept that everybody feels a little nervous and secure.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt too. So I'm actually feeling like imposter right now because I'm in the humanities and mashallah, I look around, doctors, engineers, lawyers, finance people. So as a Pakistani, being in the humanities, especially from my decades in the 90s and late 80s, I don't see, too many people having pursued the humanities. All my life, all I heard was, oh, those kachara courses, So I feel that to help, as you were saying, the younger generation, to really encourage them to pursue critical thinking careers. And to me, I can't think of any other field than the humanities where you learn to think critically. So I'm just here to put a shout out to the humanities.
Amazing. I love it. Love all those nuggets of wisdom that each of you have shared. And I'm going to take moderator privilege and ask a question, I think personally to me, and then I have direct questions for each of you. So as a mom of four, and my youngest actually is 9.5 weeks old. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. Amazing, experience being a mom. And so for those panelists who are mothers, in this panel, we'll love to hear, what advice do you give your children? I heard you just mentioned obviously instill confidence, but what advice do you give your children as it relates to you being leaders in your field? And have you ever felt mom guilt and how have you overcome that? So maybe we'll start.
Mom guilt all the time, right?
Yeah.
But I would just say the one thing is there are 2 parts to it. Number one is, when I was on the community board, there were lots of evening events and my husband traveled a lot. So I had to use childcare. And that was such a great investment. I felt so guilty because I always used to put my kids to sleep, but my girls were so proud of me. And even now to this day are so proud of me and my accomplishments that they don't really it was fun for them to have a babysitter. So like looking back, I felt guilty, but it was a great experience for them. And the second part is that it's okay to outsource housework, right? Like get a housekeeper, get somebody to cook. We have a Pakistani lady who comes and cooks because we live in New York and that's accessible. And I think changing the framing in your family that household work has to be done by mom for it to be good and okay. And having a spouse that that's your biggest, most important, choice, picking the spouse that is going to support you in those decisions. It's the biggest thing to do.
I love it.
Yeah. See, I want to underline that picking a spouse was very supportive. So for me, my best advice to my children is to what my father told me, just don't doubt yourself. And you can do this. Like my father told me as a kid, you're a good writer. And that's what I went with. I had that voice. You're good at this. And so I tell my children, you're good at what you're doing. Keep doing it. Don't let people tell you otherwise. If you feel it in your heart, just go for it.
I will say my father always used to say growing up, common sense nahi hai. So I feel like in the back of my mind, I always have to, that's my threshold of is this common sense? Anything else?
I don't have kids, but if I did have kids, one of the things I would tell them is to explore. So once you get older, you have kids, you get married, you have so many responsibilities. So explore different fields. If you want to be in a political campaign, do it. If you want to do fashion designing, do it. Because once you get older, it's much more difficult to explore those avenues. And don't let stereotypes get the best of you.
Don't tell your kids you have to be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer. Force them into those. I love it.
Because I would say I'm studying to be a diplomat, which is not a lot of Pakistanis do it. So I would tell my kids as well, you don't need to be a doctor or anything. I'd actually like that Farah is in the humanitarian. I think that's great.
The world is your oyster. Anything You ladies would like to add?
I don't have kids, but if I had to tell my younger self something, it would be don't let fear overtake you. There's so many things I did later in life that I wish I did at a younger age, but I was just too scared. And I was kind of holding myself back. Like there was no reason to be scared. It was just like I was in my own head. So advice I would give to kids, or when I have kids, inshallah, is, don't let fear overtake you. Just try. What's the worst that can happen? Like maybe you won't be that good. It's not the end of the world.
I also don't have kids, so I'll speak as a daughter instead. My mom, I have to give a huge shout out to my parents. I'm so grateful for them and the way they raised me. And my mom, she did med school in Pakistan and then came to the US, took her USMLEs, and did residency. So a lot of my primary memories of her growing up are things like there's this one spot in our local library she used to sit to study, and once a day after school, my daddy would take me to visit her, and I'd hang out with her in the library for a little bit, and then I'd go home. And so those are a lot of my memories, is her working really hard to achieve her dream career. And naturally that meant me as a child not getting as much time with her. And I have to say, like, there is not a single moment in my entire life where I remember feeling even an ounce of resentment about that. I have only ever felt proud of that. And I think that being, the earliest memories of my mom has really inspired me to always work really hard towards my career and to understand that, like, I am allowed to prioritize my career as a South Asian woman, and that I should be proud to prioritize my career as a South Asian woman, And so I think setting those examples for your kids is really powerful. So for anyone who is a mom, just please take that to heart and know that your kids are going to be so proud of you, and you are really giving them a gift by showing them your hard work and about how important it is to also care about yourself. Like as a woman, sometimes, especially as a South Asian woman, sometimes, in history, there's been this idea of like, you take care of everyone else. But we are allowed to take care of ourselves too. And I think that teaching our kids that, inshallah, my future kids, that is important. That and unconditional love. There are not many times in life you get unconditional love. And of course, parents, I think that the unconditional love is there, but it's important to fully demonstrate it, because you can love your kids unconditionally, but if you are trying to guide them to live life with certain expectations you have for them, like doctor, lawyer, engineer, they might not walk away feeling like that love is unconditional. And I think it's really important to make sure they know that it truly is, no matter what their decision in life is.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Yes.
To the theme of this panel, women's empowerment, I would just say that it's so important to also get your sons on board with that message. So like teaching your sons to be feminists, teaching your sons to respect women, teaching your sons to wash a dish once in a while or cook food is so important right now. Like I think we've made so much progress uplifting women. If you kind of look at what's happening in the US, now men felt left behind. Like we shouldn't feel anyone left behind. And then really kind of like not making it an either or, but a both, and really getting sons and men and boys on board with this journey as well is so important, especially in our community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you highlighting that.
I'll just add another story really quickly, because this what you said reminds me of my dad, actually. He was raised in Pakistan, and he we're both stubborn. We share that. But I am a feminist, and I'm not shy about it. So there are times in life that we have gotten in arguments about household roles and like, why does my mom need to do this when she comes home from work? Like you're both coming home from work, so responsibility should be shared, And like one day we got in a fight about the dishes, and it happened very quietly, but then the next day he started doing the dishes and never stopped. So like in our household, my dad is in charge of the dishes after dinner every night. And I really appreciated that. I feel like it really reminded me that even those who might not have been taught that and might have been raised with traditional gender roles, like there is room for change, there is room for growth, and we should encourage that. And also, it's a great role model for me because now I will only marry someone who does the dishes.
I love that. I will add, my husband knows he has to do the dishes after dinner and he gets my 2 sons involved, which is great. So they clean the kitchen, they do the dishes, and I love it. So it's a great example. All right, so I have some specific questions for each of you. So I'll start with Ahsia. In your work with children and families in New York City, how do you see the connection between women's empowerment and community resilience?
I'm happy to chat about it. So I'm the executive director for the Children's Cabinet. It's a mayoral office that seeks to improve and move the needle for vulnerable children and their families through convening agencies. We use City Hall's convening authority to bring them together, improve policies, reduce silos, and build better coordination and collaboration. We have several work streams that we're working on. One of them is focused actually on dads, fathers. It's the Fatherhood Initiative. As you mentioned, we're seeing changes in the way like how boys were doing. And we also saw some really amazing data that really struck us that children that were growing up in father absent households had some of the highest rates of suicide. There was like a lot of the children that are growing up homeless or going on to be criminal legal system involved were growing up in father absent households. And the question we asked and my team asked was, is it just like, let's not make assumptions. Is there something that we're doing as a barrier government that is a barrier to allowing dads to be engaged and involved? So we've really taken the reverse. There has been a lot of focus on uplifting women. The question is, what can we do to support men to be more engaged with their children and more engaged in their upbringing? Because we know that impact is good. It's good for the child. It's actually good for the dad. They live longer and are healthier. And it's really great for the moms, whether or not they're in a relationship, because they are less stressed and they have that support. So I think there's a lot of research on like paternity leave and the equitable use of paternity leave in like corporate government actually improved the government's the corporate environment for women to be successful, because as men were taking paternity leave, there was less of a desire for women who were taking maternity leave to be dinged, right? Like whether they were missing out on bonuses or missing out on other like promotions. So we're taking that twist to look at dads and looking at what we can do. And I think just realizing the whole picture, no one should feel left behind. And we just realize that we're all like a community of people. We want to support everyone to uplift and support each other.
Well, thank you for that. Farah, I have a question for you. So in academia, how do you encourage young women, especially first gen or minority students, to own their voice and intellectual space?
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to add something about that. I mean, I think what you're doing is amazing work. I think in our patriarchal culture, like a Pakistani culture, men need permission to be the kind of man that they really want to be. And I think we need more of that.
100%.
Yeah.
Like we've said, like there are times where you assume the dad's hanging back, and it's not because he wants to, he's feeling shy. And just like we support young moms and young people to get more comfortable with childcare, we need to do the same thing with dads, right? 100%.
And to answer your question about the classroom, so I work at a community college where typically the students that come to me are first generation students, and students who have come with a lot of baggage. Many come from domestic abuse situations, recent immigrants. So they do need a lot of hand-holding. And as a literature teacher, I think that the best way I can inspire my students is through stories that my curriculum, the stories I pick for them. I do the traditional Doll's House. I do Proof by David Auburn, which is a story about a female who is a math genius, but she is living in the shadow of a genius father, and nobody ever believes that she actually did this proof. And it took a long while. The whole story is about how she actually arrived at owning that, no, I wrote the proof. So stories like that really, I think, help spark something in my students. And through their writing and assignments, I encourage them to write about reflections. So I really think it's what I have them read, and the power of storytelling is my way.
That's so powerful. And actually, that's what we talk about in public health is public health has a storytelling problem. So we need to tell more stories of why someone got vaccinated or why someone decided to, X, Y, and Z. So that's such a great example. Amazing. So Anoussa, at the UN level and through Sochi's mission, how do you ensure wellness and mental health are seen as essential components of women's empowerment globally?
So I think one of the ways I did that was this year in March with the Commission of Status Women. I attended a few forums and events that focus on women's empowerment, but also focus on women's wellness. I spoke with the permanent mission of India's ambassador who spoke about women's healthcare programs and depression being almost 1/3 of women in India face depression. So my way and Sochi's way of speaking about women's wellness is attending these forums. I was a speaker at 2 of these forums as well and spoke about how we need more discussions and more programs that focus on women's health.
Thank you. Shafaq, how can women lead sustainability efforts in the corporate world? And what does it take to center gender equity in climate and ESG strategies?
So sustainability has been really great because there are a lot of women at the center. If you kind of look at who chief sustainability officers are, you're seeing a lot of women kind of in those roles, which I think is new. In the past, you would see men who were maybe leading another initiative get kind of placed in these roles without this background. But the fact that it is very like nurturing field, a care-based field kind of leads women to it, which has been lovely for me to go to my professional conferences and be around a group of like-minded, passionate women. I think the original environmental movement was very siloed. It was kind of very like conservation focused, not really people at the center. I think as the movement has grown and climate change has come to the center, we're seeing a lot of intersectionality as well. So we're realizing that like environmental programs are human issues as well, whether it's PFAS or climate change. And that kind of evolution in the field of practice, it's not a new field. It's been around since like the 80s. So we're babies. But there's been like a great evolution around like you can't treat these issues as silos because it's also interconnected. And that's led to a lot of work through the UN and other organizations to really place women at the center of these discussions, because women are often at the front lines of these issues, whether it's in a rural village who's grabbing water, who's doing the cooking, or in a company, like a lot of sustainability leaders are women, or in your day-to-day lives. There are forest fires in LA. Who do you think was really responsible for planning evacuations and getting people's families out of the door and then coming back and checking on everyone and then having to deal with the aftermath? I can guarantee you that women were kind of leading those efforts. So I think kind of being intentional about finding these women and reaching out to them is important. There needs to be more work in that regard of really kind of going out to these communities and finding these women. There's like, I would say kind of a tendency to just stick with your circle and not expand. So that's one way. And then just telling these stories, back to storytelling of kind of why this is important and how it impacts people in their day-to-day is another way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So Farah, as a human rights attorney and co-founder of a legal nonprofit, how do you balance grassroots advocacy with international legal frameworks to center marginalized women?
This is a great question. And it's a balance that I work on every day. I really love grassroots activism. I love being in protests. I love all of the different movements that we've seen. I'm deeply involved in the movement for a free Palestine. And a lot of times, friends and comrades that I have who are leading a lot of the disruptions, I want to be a part of. But then I always have to take a step back and ask myself, you know, what will be better for the cause? What purpose can I serve better for the cause? You know, being part of this disruption will feed something in my soul that I'm feeling, but will it ultimately feed the cause in the best way I could? And the answer is often no. The best thing I can be is on the legal side of things, waiting to bail them out of jail. And so I think how to balance, you know, grassroots activism with legal frameworks is a constant question, and particularly with this issue, and also with you know, the chaos that we see the U.S. legal system descending into over the last 3 months, and I would say even many years before that. It's hard to understand how to best work within a legal framework where the system and the framework is broken, and sometimes it does require being creative. But I think the best thing I have realized I can do is centering the people that I'm trying to help, understanding what they need, and how I can best be helpful to them. Just pause, maybe.
Future rising star.
I like to give voices to everybody.
Young. All of you.
Thank you for tuning in from all around the world, folks.
Well, yeah.
We'll plow through. Please feel free to continue.
Maybe I'll ask for a little bit more clarification on the question to make sure I'm answering it properly.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess instead of, you know, going back to the question, you know, I'd love to hear, as you talk about grassroots advocacy for women who want to do more in your particular field, any specific advice that you have for them?
Yeah, I think the advice is don't be afraid to get involved. Don't be afraid to feel like a leader. You know, we've talked a lot about imposter syndrome, and I think this is another field where it's very real. I think one thing that has been really incredible for me to see in these last few months is for those of you who have heard of the nonprofit Muslim Legal Fund of America, MALFA, if you haven't, I highly recommend you look them up. They're an amazing organization. They have really taken a huge lead on Muslim civil rights since 9/11. But that organization, the CEO, the executive director, and the legal director are both these amazing, strong, powerful women. And then in CARE Chicago, which I speak with often, they recently hired a legal director who is also a woman. And you know, we are in calls together, and I can't tell you how profound the impact has been on me to watch the leaders of these organizations be women. And the impact of that, not just on me, but on the community and on the work that's being done, I think is really powerful. And it really made me think that like I can be in those seats one day, you know, and that I can be taking the lead on litigation that once upon a time might have felt like, okay, as a woman, no one will take me seriously if I do this. Like I must find like a male counterpart to do this with me. Like I try not to think like that anymore, you know, because it's not about whether someone else takes me seriously or not. It's, am I taking myself seriously? Do I feel like I can do it? And that is what I need to, that's the energy I need to put out into the world, you know, and that's what I need to be focusing on. So I think that has made a big difference for me. And so if you are a woman in leadership, I think this was also mentioned before, but definitely reach out to those who want to be where you are, and serve as a mentor. You know, I think we really need more amazing women in the legal field. And so anytime I meet amazing women who want to be in the legal field, and I met some fabulous women last night who I I need them to be attorneys. Okay, the future of this country depends on it. But I want to drop everything and do whatever I can to help them, because I didn't have that help, and it makes it that much harder. You know, there are resources I found out about long after that I think would have made my journey easier. And I don't believe in the whole like, I had to struggle like this, so you should too. I think if I had to struggle like this, then it's worth it if I can make sure you don't have to, you know, because inevitably there will be other struggles along the way. But how can we continue to build on each other's work so that the pathway is that much easier for each generation that comes? And then I'll just say one last thing, which I'm not sure if it directly answers your question or not, but it's something I wanted to bring up, is the idea of being emotional. As someone who wanted to be an attorney, which, you know, people don't think of it as an emotional field. I've always been told my whole life, like, you want to be an attorney, like you need to think with your head, not with your feelings, you know? Or you know, how are you an attorney if you're gonna cry over this or you're gonna be emotional over this? And I really have come to a point where I am proud to be emotional, and I think that my feelings and my emotions make me a better attorney and a better advocate. I think it allows me to be more empathetic to my clients, and it drives a lot of the motivation I have for taking on cases that feel really difficult. And I think once you know, acknowledge your feelings, as not just as women, but as people, as human beings, you know, and I think men should in fact be more emotional in these fields, or at least allow themselves to not repress those emotions, because when you're managing them, when you're allowing yourself to feel them, then they're not coming out in unhealthy ways. You know, you're not feeling burnout in the same ways. And you're able to continue the work, and you're able to help your clients. And so for anyone who wants to be an attorney, don't ever let anyone tell you that being emotional is a bad thing. Don't ever let anyone tell you that if you're emotional, you can't be rational. It is not one or the other. You can be both. And we are both, you know, and your emotions can make you stronger. And so focus on them, focus on feeling in a healthy way, and focus on letting it drive you, because you know, as women, we're told that a lot, and it needs to change. And as mothers, make sure you're telling your daughters their emotions are a good thing. You know, there's something that can help them move forward, not backward.
Absolutely. And I will say one of the reasons why females make better leaders is because we bring emotions into it. So I love that. So just to close our amazing panel today, I have a question that I would love for each of you just, you know, to answer very briefly, if you could. And this is something that if I were to tell, you know, my younger self a piece of advice, it would be to lead. No one's going to tell you it's your time to lead. So if you feel you have the confidence, you go ahead and do it, right? No one's going to say, it's your time, go ahead and do it, right? Very often that's never going to happen. So I'd love for each of you to very briefly mention, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self or to young women entering your field, what would it be?
Similar to yours, no one's going to sit there and give you what you're due. You should actually be advocating for it and grabbing that gold ring whenever the opportunity comes. Don't assume it'll come to you.
Yeah, I would just say that to pursue your passion, and do not let cultural expectations bore you down. Don't carry that as a baggage, and just if that's what you want to do, don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
I think I would tell my younger self to reach out to people, ask for mentorship, and speak to different categories of people, look at different types of career fields. And to the young women that want to go into the UN or want to go into diplomacy, one of the things I would tell them is to be creative. Diplomacy, everyone thinks is very like, oh, you have to be a diplomat, you have to be like very straight. I think a lot of the world issues can be resolved through creative means, and I would tell them to be very creative.
I would say don't let fear and anxiety hold you back. So I'll give a personal anecdote. Like a year ago, I started doing trapeze classes, and I wish I did it like 10 years ago, but when I was younger, I was always so scared to put myself in these new spaces because I was like, what if I mess up? What if I'm not good? What if everyone stares at me because I fell? No one cares most of the time.
Shafaq, could you just define what that class is for those that are not aware?
Yeah, it's like Cirque du Soleil, pretty much. I started as a form of exercise, and then it's become so fun, and like I'm doing stuff I never thought I could do. And I've met this really wonderful artsy community who never felt who are so amazing and talented. And since we started, they never made us feel like we're just beginners. They're like, yeah, you're an aerialist. So that kind of showed me when I was younger, I would be too scared to kind of take that first step. Or if I couldn't convince someone to go with me, I wouldn't want to go alone. I wish I started this, like I said, a decade ago, because I'd be so much better than I am now. And really, most of the time, people aren't looking at what you're doing. They're in their own head. And most of the time, people want to help. Obviously, you need to know what those environments are. There are some environments where you can't let yourself be that vulnerable, like in a board meeting. But finding these safe spaces can help you for those other environments as well. So yeah, don't be scared. Don't let anxiety hold you back. Just do the thing.
I'll need to touch base with you after to get info on those trapeze classes. That sounds amazing. But I would say the advice I would give a younger version of myself or a younger woman would be life isn't linear. It has ups and downs. The pathway to any sort of success is one that is constantly shifting, one that involves a lot of valleys and peaks, and inevitably will have some sort of failures or some sort of mistakes. And so if you make those mistakes or those failures, don't let them hold you back from continuing to move forward. You might be in, a valley, but it is still a valley forward. So keep going, keep climbing because, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect to be successful. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to be perfect to be perfect in your own way, really. Imperfection is perfection in its own way. It's how we were created as humans. So I think that is the best advice I could give.
I love that. Well, ladies, thank you so much for everything that you do for empowering our community. Real honor and privilege to be your moderator. And I hope that you continue to give back in our community as you are doing today. And again, thank you all for your service.